So let's start with a very tiny story.
And so she came down to earth with such a force that everyone was scared that the earth will split into two. That's when Shiva stepped forward and said, "Leave this to me. Let her fall on my head. I will slow her down with my long matted hair."
He had a moon on his head?
Yeah, and he even looks like the Himalayan mountains. The moon is white like the snow-capped peaks. The river Ganga flows from all that snow and ice melt, the glaciers. And all that hair are the dense forests and vegetation.
And the snake? Is that about wild animals in the forests? What do you think, Mama?
So in 2013, when I began making this film, I was not a researcher. I was not a scientist. I was not religious. I'm not now. I was not a social worker, not an engineer, not a tribal. I was not a fish. I was just a common human in search of a river, my river. This is the Ganga, known as Ganges in the rest of the world. We used to holiday by this river. This was some time back, about 15 years back, with my family, with my mom and my brothers and my dad. And we would go to this river for a few days every year for a few years. And we would have a really, really good time. Very, very memorable moments we would spend there. And the river used to flow at that time, and flow very swift and very fast, and the color was what as you see here, very bluish green, and we were mesmerized by this river. So yeah, we fell in love, and here's another shot. This is the river coming downhill on the foothills of the Himalayas in Rishikesh. A lot of water. There were no dams upstream at that point. And then I took a break of a few years, and I did not go. And then life happened, and I had a child, and she grew up to be 5 years old. And when she was 5, I thought it was time for her to experience Ganga and for her to go. And it was time for me to introduce her to the river and have her see what I had been talking about. And I had been telling her all these stories, like the one you heard, very dramatized versions of mythology or even geography. Not just mythology, geography, like the entire Indian subcontinent, how it came and it rammed into Asia, and all these mountains came up and all that. She would be awed by these stories, and there were stories about the fish, the mahseer fish, which was like 3 feet or sometimes 4, much bigger than her. And I would tell her about the family times we have had and how I had spent time with my mother by the river, and now she should also see what it all meant for all of us. And she got pretty excited about it. And so we went back, and we always used to go into the Himalayas where the river was, not in the plains. So we went back there. And this is what we found of the river. Now this is the Bhagirathi River. Now there are 2 main rivers, Bhagirathi and Alaknanda, that originate in the Himalayas, and then they come down and meet at a place called Devprayag. And from there it starts becoming Ganga. It's called Ganga, but it's the same river, right? So, so this is Bhagirathi. This is how it looked like, and no river. I mean, it's all gone. It's not like we misplace our keys or we say, oh, our wallet has disappeared. Where's our wallet? It's disappeared. The entire river, or what we saw of it, was not there at all. Some puddles of water here and there, very stagnant. No sounds of gushing water, of course. So we talked to the local people, and we asked, so what happened? And they said, well, our region has developed, and and a lot of developmental activity is taking place around this place. And there are a few dams upstream that have come up, which are generating electricity for the country. And so then we said, okay. And my daughter again had, of course, questions of her own. And she asked, so where did all the water go? Which was a very valid question. Where did all the water go? And then she said, where did all the fish go? If the water is not there, where did the fish go? And then she asked me a question which sort of put me up a stump. And she asked me, if the river is not there, why do you tell me stories about it? You know, now she was questioning my storytelling. So I didn't have any answers at that point for her. And my brother was there, Marthan was there, and we discussed about it, and we wondered why a river, and this is not just a river, this is the Ganges we are talking about. Ganges is, I mean, we talk about her since eternity. I mean, it's in our mythology. We say, you know, she's responsible for the birth of a civilization, and we call her mother, goddess, and all of that. And yet, when a river disappears, there is no talk about it down in the plains where we came from. And not just talk, I mean, the media doesn't discuss about it. People like us, common people who just go about our daily lives, we don't know that there is no Ganges up in the mountains. So nobody's talking about it. So that sort of was more disturbing, that something like this has happened and nobody's talking about it. So we thought, let's do something, right? So what do we do? I mean, let's get people to know about this. How do we get people to know about this? If we go down and tell them there is no Ganges, they'll say, what are you talking about? Ganga has been there for so long. So we said, okay, let's make a film about it. And so, now I forget to tell you, 2013, I was not a filmmaker either. And so Marthan knew something about the cameras, and so he bought a camera, a tiny little camera, a Canon, and I remember we got a very tiny audio equipment. We got a $30 lav mic, and with very, very basic equipment, we set out to meet people who have been working in this area of water and rivers for decades, right? This is another shot of Asi Ganga, which is another tributary of the Ganga, the Ganges, up in the mountains. No water at all, right? So, so we began our meeting a person called Himanshu Tucker. He is a coordinator of SANDRP, South Asian Network of Dams, Rivers and People. And this organization, and Himanshu in particular, has been working working on rivers, and he's a researcher. He's been working on river issues for a long, long time. And if there's any person you need to have, if you have any questions, he's the person to go to, because he's like an encyclopedia of all of these issues, right? So we met him, and we had this tiny set of equipment, and we had loads and loads of questions. So we met him, and this is one of the first interviews that we did, and I think we interviewed about 3 or 4 times over the period of 4 years. So he introduced us to the issue of how everything came to being what it is.
See, actually, since 1991, India has been on a new trajectory for growth and development. It's been seen as growth through privatization, globalization as the only means of development. And in that era, there were demands for more and more resources, including electricity. And it was seen that India needs to harness all available energy sources. And so there was a push for more hydropower projects. It started at that time, but the movement really accelerated starting from the first years of this millennia, 2000-2001 onwards. Actually, NDA government initiated a 50,000 megawatt hydro initiative. They wanted to set up within a time frame 50,000 megawatt of hydropower.
So just a little background on where we were at that point, at the time we started making the film. This was again 2013. And all of these figures are very, very suspect in the sense that all the people that we talked to, and this includes the Ministry of Power, they never came up with a single figure or a very confident answer to our questions. So there were 51 operating hydropower projects, each over 1 megawatt, 47 were operational. And this is all in the Ganga River Basin, right? And then 40 projects under construction, again, a number which you can say give or take a few projects. And then the last one is quite a whopper. It is 80 to 600. So at that point, the number of dams being planned on the Ganga River Basin were anywhere between 80 to 600 dams. And these are all hydropower projects on the Ganga River Basin. So if all of these would come to fruition, if all of these were set up, the Ganga River Basin would become one of the densest dam sites on the planet. Right. So now each of these projects need to go through a certain set of clearances. And one of the clearances is the environmental clearance. And our focus was on that because that is what we were dealing with, the environment. So here is Himanshu again talking about, now when he gave the interview, he talked to us about environmental clearances and all the processes that need to be or ideally should be followed. For about 20 minutes he talked about it. So quite a complex process and quite intricate. And I have about 2 minutes of it for you now. And he talks about hydropower projects, but we can apply probably or nearly the same processes for other forms of energy, big centralized energy production as well. So let's hear what he has to say about environmental impact assessment, which is the EIA process.
Environmental governance of the project starts before the project work starts, then during the work, then during operation, and so on. One set of clearances that come for the hydropower project is in terms of the environmental related clearances. They include environment clearance, which comes in 2 stages. Then there is forest clearance if the project requires forest land. If the project also affects some of the protected areas, or it is within 10-kilometer radius of any existing protected areas, then it also requires wildlife clearance. Any EIA is supposed to include 3-season survey, full year survey of the flora, fauna, agricultural practices, water use, river flow patterns, so many things. Before the project comes for final environment clearance, the environmental impact assessment is supposed to be made available to the local people, and which is the basis for the public hearing that is supposed to happen. The EIA, which is supposed to be the only document which informs the people, which will help people participate in an informed way at the public hearing, is not available in the local language. It is always in English. It's a 300-600 page document in lot of technical jargon. Cumulative impact assessment becomes very important when you have more than one project on the same river. Now, if you don't do that, then you may end up wrong decisions, a technically wrong decision, unviable decisions. The environmental impact assessment is supposed to also include actually options assessment, which will tell you whether the given project, the proposed project, is the best option among all the available options. In fact, our environment minister, former environment minister Jairam Ramesh, is on records having said that the EIAs are fixed documents, cut and paste dishonest jobs. But the Ministry of Environment has never rejected any hydropower or dam project for this kind of faulty EIA.
So, he talks about a couple of things. He talks about the cut and paste jobs of the environment, the EIAs, and this has happened earlier in some assessments. There have been animals, names of animals and shrubs and foliage and trees reported in the assessment which don't exist in the region at all. That is how shoddy the environment reports are. And he talks about cumulative impact assessments. Now, this is also a very important point. And he really elaborated on it when we talked about it. So cumulative means what it says. It means that when a project comes up on a river, there are a whole lot of other activities that surround the project. For example, now again, so again, going back to the two rivers, the Bhagirathi and Alaknanda, there are a whole lot of tributaries that are joining, that come and join into these two big major rivers. Now, dams are proposed and dams are planned and dams are being constructed in all of these tributaries. And these are pristine areas. These are untouched Himalayan regions where there is no road, there is no electricity, there's hardly anything there except a few villages here and there scattered. So when a project comes up there, how do you get, what you need is people. You need big, heavy equipment to be transported there. So how do you do that? You build roads. And how do you build roads? And these are, we're not talking about flat surfaces. We're talking about 45-degree angles and, mountains that are steep. And how do you do that? You blast your way through into these regions. Now, Himalayas are a very young mountain range, and they are very brittle in nature. And when you actually go into the mountains and you kind of scrape the mountain sides that have been cut, you will find just pebbles and rocks and mud and sand. They are not like solid rock that will stay. When they blast their way through the mountains and into these pristine areas, the mountains move about. They tremble, they vibrate, and so that results in a whole lot of landslides. Now, when we were driving up and down the basin, there were times when we wouldn't see the road for a long time. Why? Because there have been landslides throughout the entire road that we were kind of very slowly going, and this is in the case throughout the basin. And then there are these run-of-the-river tunnels. Now, so there are many different types of dams, right? There are big gravity dams, and then there are these run-of-the-river dams, which are kind of showcased by the companies and the governments as the most environmentally friendly technologies. And so, which sound very good, actually, the way they describe it, but the way they are implemented in the mountains is very different. So what they do is they put a wall, put an impoundment in place, they stop the water level rises, and then they dig a tunnel through from here, and then they keep digging a tunnel inside, and the tunnel takes the entire water from the river, from the storage, and it goes, and the dam that we were, Maneri Bhali Dam, the tunnel was about 8 kilometers long, 8.2 kilometers long. So now the river water is in the tunnels, and outside the riverbed was completely dry, and then downstream somewhere, they would release the water, the turbines would spin, the electricity would be made. Now you would say, okay, there are hundreds of kilometers of river, lengths in the basin. What would this do? I mean, 8 kilometers is not a big deal, but the way it is implemented is the dam wall is here, the river is dry, the water is released here, and the next dam begins right in front of it. So now we are talking about a cascade of dams throughout the basin. Now, the way they dig the tunnels is again with blasting of dynamite and other explosives. So all of this results in a lot of shaking and a lot of damage in this very fragile mountain range, and a lot of landslides and land sinking happens. So and sometimes it results in a very serious damage to the villages that are there in the mountains. Let's hear this out.
One such village that had faced the brunt is Chammakpur, perched right above the tunnel entrance of one of the Himalayan dams.
It was 91 or 92. There was a severe earthquake in Uttarkashi, and around that time, all the other villages, there was not so much of destruction. But Chammakpur gaon ke andar, there were maximum number of casualties. Why? There were maximum number of casualties. So this is the area where, apart from the tunnel, there was nothing else.
76 people died in Chammakpur alone. The incident wasn't isolated. Throughout the Ganga River basin, around construction sites of these massive developmental projects, as the earth below trembles.
So this was just one of the many, many incidents that happen in the Himalayas. This is a 2018 news item, very recent, and it talks about mountain springs drying up. This is being reported in the mainstream media, and it is 2018, but actually this news is not news of 2018. This has been happening for many, many years. And when we went, we sort of saw firsthand just how this impacted the local people. We have Mallika and Bharat Dehi and Vandana Shiva talk about this.
जब भी कोई भी बांध बनता है, जब भी ब्लास्टिंग होती है, क्योंकि ये पत्थरों का एरिया है, वहाँ पर कोई भी पानी रिवर का इस्तेमाल तो करता नहीं है. वहाँ पे पानी जो इस्तेमाल होता है, वो सब जो पानी छनकर पहाड़ों से चलकर जो स्प्रिंग वाटर सोर्सेज हैं, वही पानी के स्रोत होते हैं. These are fresh water sources and they have been perennial water sources for villages since eternity. Now when blasting starts to happen, and then these boulders, these mountains, they move about, the water gets displaced. All the fresh water of the mountains, it just flows into the tunnels. So obviously there is nothing in the villages.
एक स्रोत नीचे थे, वो भी बंद हो गए अपना आप. वहाँ में आते नहीं पानी, एक बूंद भी नहीं आते. एक स्रोत वहाँ पे थे, वहाँ हमने सारे को बहुत काम किया, चाल बनाई, बड़ी चाल. अब जब पानी नहीं उसमें तो क्या करना किसी ने उसको भी. एक हम ऊपर बनाया चाल, उसमें भी हम खुदाई किए, अच्छी चाल बनाया, तो वहाँ में भी पानी नहीं, मुश्किल हो गया.
Because we are here in Uttarakhand and we work continuously in the communities, 2 years ago when we had a very severe drought, we did a deep survey of what was it doing to women and children. 75% of the streams had disappeared because of climate havoc, because climate change intensifies drought and floods and cyclones. Women were having to walk even further for water. Worse, children had stopped going to school because they had to carry that additional pot. When a stream comes through, you fill your pot in 5 minutes and go home. When it comes as a trickle, drop by drop by drop, a child is standing there for 6 hours to collect 1 day's need of water. Women and children always carry the heaviest burden of ecological destruction, and the disappearance of water is no exception.
So we actually followed a couple of, not these women, but we actually followed a couple of women where they walked about a kilometer and a half to collect water for their house, just simple household needs. And we took the camera and we actually followed, and this was again in the Himalayas, so it's not 1.5 kilometers of walking for them is okay, because they've always walked 1.5 kilometers up in the mountains, but for us, with all the equipment and everything, it was pretty tedious. So there's a very interesting story about how the first day we went into the village, and we were carrying again our equipment, and we were city folk, right? Very unfit people. So we went there, and we go into the house, and guess what? The first thing that they ask us is, they ask us, would you like to have a glass of water? And so I said, yeah, sure. And this is the first day of shoot in the village. And they bring water, and I drink it up, and then the whole day we shoot, and we go back. And then when we shoot, actually, even then we find out just how the water came into their house. And so the next day we went back again, and they asked water. I said, no, we're fine, we're good. And we go back into our, and we shoot the whole day, and we're thirsty like crazy. And we go back to our the place where we were staying, And the caretaker comes in and I said, oh, I want water. I mean, I'm really, really thirsty. So what happened? So I didn't drink there. So he started laughing. He like just doubled up. So in a way, it is kind of normal for them to accept these hardships and still go on with life. And these two women actually are, what they are holding on their backs is food and foliage for their cows. Now, each family that we went, the village we went to, Dilsor, was each family had about 1 or 2 cows or a calf. Earlier, what they tell me is they used to have 4 or 5 or more. But now they cannot maintain so many because they have to feed and actually take care of them. So the way their economics works is in their household, there's cow and the cow gives plenty. And there's the cows give milk also. So the women, they feed the cow and they milk and they sell the milk and get the money. So now if you don't feed the cow properly, they don't give enough milk. So now when the springs and the groundwater was there, say about 20 years back, the women would go out at 6 in the morning and collect this kind of fodder. And come back by 10 or 11 during the day. And then they have farming to do, kids to take care of, and all other stuff going on. But now, since the springs are gone and the groundwater is gone, the forests are dry, and they call it ghas. Ghas is grass. It's not grass, it's foliage. But anyways, the cattle don't graze, so the women have to go deep into the mountains. And what they told me was about 20 to 25 kilometers every single day to get a bunch of this kind of foliage for the cows to eat. So they would leave at 6 in the morning and they would come back at around 4 or 5 in the evening just for one job of feeding the cows. So you would understand what happens to the rest of the work that is there, the farms to be tilled and you know other work that is there in the house that doesn't get done. This was a gruesome one. So a river is the geography of it. The river acts as a barrier against predators and natural hazards from other parts of the whole region. So if there's a village here and there's a river flowing there, the village stays protected from elements from the other side of the river. When the river goes, there's another part to this. When the river goes, the leopards come, that's fine. But when the river, so over centuries, the way the people live is, or die is, they would cremate their dead, right? So they would cremate their dead beside the river Ganges. Now, sometimes it so happens that the wood is damp, and so it's not burnt properly. The corpse is still there. So in such cases, when the leopards come, they get a taste of human flesh, and they turn man-eaters. Now, this is not folklore. We were there, and we saw them living this. We saw corpses being burned. We saw the fear of leopards around was so near and so discomforting. Nobody would go out alone at dusk or beyond that. They would carry stuff. They would carry sticks and some kind of thing to ward the attack off. But this danger was there, very, very present in the region. It's not just one village we're talking about. We are talking about Matli, which is a small town beside the village, but very real and very, very present. So Bindana Devi is a village elder from Dilsor who talks about it. Very matter of factly, by the way.
वही तो कह रहे थे हम कि मतलब वो जब बाघ तो खाएंगे उसको। अब जैसे वो नदी में छोड़ रखा उनने, नदी के पास जल है इन्हें, अब जंगल से वो आ रहे, अब उसको मिल गए तो उसने तो खाने। तो वो जो मनखे का बाघ पर मनखे का मांस वाला जो मीठा होते बाल, तो मनखे का मांस पर लग गए। तब मनखे का मांस पर लग गए हो तो हम मनखे का अब घर घर आने लग गए हो और घर घर बच्चों को खींच के लिए जा रहे। किसी ने आधा पाई, कभी सुना हमने कि किसी का झगुला मिला है, किसी का पैजामा मिला है बच्चों का, बाघ ने खट्टी पट्टी पा के घर से ले गए उठा के वो जंगल में। तो कहीं पैजामा मिला बच्चों का जो ढूंढ में गए लोग, कहीं पैजामा मिला, कहीं झगुली, कुछ ऊपर का कपड़ा, कुछ नीचे का कपड़ा कहीं।
So I bet none of these stories would have even featured in any of the EIAs that we are talking about, right? So all that I showed you today or talked about is not there in the film. The film, giving you a very raw deal here. And I talked about just the hydro component of it. And hydro is just 1/3 of the film. There's coal, and then there's the rise of solar and wind, and we go in depth into each area, talking to, again, researchers, doctors, and social workers, and people, and the builders themselves. So what's there in the film? In the film we have, these are very few of the things that are listed here, but there's more. There's social and cultural impact of a disappearing Ganges. There's geology and seismicity, and these dams are built on top of faults, and some very active faults as well. Farming and livelihood is something that we covered a little bit. Fish, we covered, again, it's a panoptic film, right? We are connecting the dots between a whole lot of different perspectives. We set out to find the truth about what's going on, but all we found were perspectives. A scientist would have a different perspective, a villager would have a different, the same valley, the same river, the same water, we're talking about the same issue. There's so many different perspectives, and this fish is also a perspective, right? So we covered that as well, and we covered a little bit of northeastern Himalayas where the same sort of issues are taking place, if not more dramatic, because Brahmaputra is a big volume river. So, and then there's the dark side of coal, which is the second half of the film, third of the film, and then there's rise of solar and wind. So I'll move on to the making of Sanjay. So when I finished the film, and this is an independent production completely, when I finished the film, my peers and people said it's a big deal, and I didn't know about it actually. So I thought I'd just list out on hindsight what we did to finish this entire feature. Knowing the story, we did not know the story when we began filming. We had these questions, but the answers would make the story that the film would be about. We didn't know the answers. So there was a downside to it that a lot of wastage happened, that we covered a whole lot of things, about hundreds of hours of footage, and that had to be condensed into, say, an hour and a half or less. And it was like taming a wild beast on the edit table, right? So in case any of you are thinking of making a film, know your story would be a good way to start. Not knowing is also good, because then you approach the project with a really, really open mind. We listened a lot. We listened to everybody. We listened to the children in the village. We listened to the tribals. We listened to the researchers. We listened to the boy who served us in the restaurant. We listened to everybody. And that really, really helped get more and more perspective into the film. We did not wait for stuff to happen. We did not wait for the grants. We did not wait for emails, people to get back with their emails. We did not wait for anything. We just kind of plunged into the deep end with the camera and whatever little that we had. We made full use of our ignorance about the subject, about what's going on. And that is probably because of why the film turned out to be the way it is right now. And we stayed stubborn throughout. It took about 4.5 years to make. And it got ready late last year, and it made a European premiere in Germany early this year.
Mama, is this Ganga? You said it is a Fjordis river. If the river is not there, why read stories about it?
Yes, really, you environmentalists. क्या बोलोगे आप? ये मत बनाओ, वो मत बनाओ, go green.
पिछले 2-3 साल पहले बोला उन्होंने कि हमें खेत दे दो यहाँ.
The impact of dams on fish is something we've absolutely not studied. We don't want to go there.
Show me one honest EIA. You show me any EIA, I will show you what is the problem, the fundamental problem.
Whoa! Nice, and look at that!
We are generating ash in terms of millions of tons. I think last year we probably generated some 160 million tons.
आपने सोलर कुकर के बारे में सुना है?
वो उसमें बनता है सौर ऊर्जा से.
हाँ.
100% renewable energy really must be the goal. Really must be the goal.
So it sounds like what you're proposing, what the movie's proposing is a push towards renewable energy, mainly solar and wind, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Does India have that kind of natural capacity to sustain itself with those kind of renewable energies? Because one of the arguments I hear is that hydropower is important because it is such a easy and powerful renewable energy source, and so people are reluctant to say, like, even in the US, that like we can't just like not build dams, but it seems like there are natural consequences to that.
Yeah, so there are natural consequences. You would see it in the film. Arguments are put forth in favor of big hydro. And the arguments are that they are clean and green, and I would echo all the researchers that we talked to, and they would say that, you know, it depends upon how you define clean and how you do define green. If you're submerging a whole lot of land, and if you're drying up rivers, then how would you define it as green? Especially when there is an alternative energy source available, which is getting cheaper and cheaper by the day. There is again there are arguments in favor of coal as well, despite all that we show in the film and all that is. And again, the film covers a lot, but then please be mindful that it's just the tip of the iceberg of what actually is happening all over the country and all over the world, probably, right? So there are arguments put forth, but when you compare just how what a dam does to a river and the ecosystem, and what a distributed solar model does, there is actually there is no comparison when it comes to destroying livelihoods and cultures and you know, just the ecology of the entire region.
Thanks for making this, and thanks for presenting. It's great. I have two questions. One, it seems like the EIAs were actually supposed to be a natural mechanism to protect against bad decisions, and they're failing incredibly. And so the first question is, did you see any optimistic, sign for like the mechanism being actually enforced? Is there any hope that EIAs will improve, that the people responsible will be held accountable? And second question, like in your journeys, did you come across some examples of where the local community was able to push back against this top-down agenda of more hydropower? Like, were there any small local victories against a larger top-down?
So do we have time? I have about 6 minutes of actual film that I would like to show to you. It's about a time where the entire discourse about hydropower dams in India changed after that event, the Uttarakhand floods. So it's part of the film, and I'd like to show it to you if we have time, right? So this was again 2013. Just a little bit of background, and this part is towards the end of the hydro segment in the film. It's about these flash floods that had happened in Uttarakhand, and what it did to the dams and what the dams did to the floods and the people. So it was a very give and take kind of a situation there.
वाह, इतना बड़ा. You know, Jawaharlal Nehru once said, Indiana dams are the temples of doom.
He said modernity, dams in India are temples of modernity.
Doom, modernity, same thing.
We did find some issues though.
What issues?
Let's see.
नहीं निकल सकता हूँ. हाँ निकल सकता है यार वो. अब नहीं निकलेगा फिलहाल.
June 2013 marked a shift in the hydropower discourse in the country. While the intense and prolonged cloudburst that Uttarakhand witnessed was attributed to climate change, it resulted in one of the most devastating floods in known history. Cloudbursts are not new in the Himalayas. Only this time, the millions of tons of dam and mountain debris that had been dumped all along the basin turned the water flow into a monstrous deluge. While the media covered broken roads, buildings, and a truly heroic rescue operation by the army, the complete chaos and destruction of the dams was not mentioned. So we went in. The riverbed had risen almost everywhere, at some places over 50 to 65 feet. During the cloudburst, part of a glacier broke away and crashed into a mountain lake, which then emptied itself into Kedarnath Valley. The raging floodwaters then headed downstream for Lanco's 76 megawatt Fata Byung Dam in Sitapur, choking its diversion tunnels with tons of silt and boulders. The torrent then flattened the barrage before moving down to Kund, the site of L&T's Singori Bhatwari plant. L&T's powerhouse was completely wiped out.
हाँ ये सुबह कटा हुआ था, रात को नीचे वाला बैग
कितने ये हुआ क्यों? बारिश के चलते हुआ?
बारिश भी हुई और भी आगे जेपी डैम है इसका गेट नहीं खोलने से तो पूरा बढ़ गया, यहाँ से पूरा एक साथ आ गया पानी. नहीं तो उसका गेट खुलता है ना तो पानी कम आता है, इतना पानी से कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता.
गेट नहीं खोला,
एक साथ खोल दिया, वो टूट गया, टाइम ही लगा.
बैग बंद ही रखा ना पहले
पूरा पानी, क्योंकि अगर
पानी भर
कुछ जमा रहता कुछ आता तो इसमें कोई फर्क
बाद में उसका प्रेशर रोक नहीं पाया, वो तो वो फट
पूरा एक साथ ही आया, निकल गया.
जहाँ से हाँ जैसे नेशनल हाईवे रोड था उस साइड से फट गया वो. तो तब वो एक साथ फ्लैट आ गया. ये लगातार बहुत जोर से ही था, इसका जो वेग था
12 घंटा जोर से ही चला.
ये ऐसे नहीं था पहले एक तरह की एक बार बादल फट गया 10-15 मिनट के लिए आता था, नहीं ये तो लगातार जब चल रहा था चल रहा था. ये तो देखने वाला नजारा था.
The dams at Srinagar, Dholi Ganga, Moti Ghat, Madhya Maheshwar, Asi Ganga 1 and 2, Maneri Bhali 1 and 2 suffered damages as well.
ऐसा तो कहीं मैंने देखा ही नहीं कि इतना सीधे सरल पहाड़ तोड़कर ये मलबा उधर ही डाल रहे, नदी में फेंक रहे हैं। मतलब क्या पोल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड कर रहे हैं स्टेट का और सेंटर का, ये समझ में नहीं आता।
2 टरबाइन है भैया, और जहाँ बांध बन रहा वहाँ से भी पता नहीं कितनी बार जेसीबी पता नहीं क्या क्या बैठ।
नहीं, पर ये तो बहुत महंगा सामान हुआ, ये तो VHL की पूरी मशीन जो अब लगनी थी वहाँ।
400 मेगावाट का विष्णु प्रयाग, ये जोशीमठ से आगे जो है, उस विष्णु प्रयाग को तो ऐसे भर दिया अलग जेपी का जो, और साथ में किनारे की जमीन काट दी है। अब अगर वो सफाई कर भी दे अगले 4-5 महीने में, तो भी नदी जो है उसने अपना रास्ता ही बदल दिया, नदी ने रास्ता बदल दिया, तो वो उनको उधर लगाना पड़ेगा, फिर बैराज उधर भराई करनी पड़ेगी। उनका डैम यहाँ छूट गया, रास्ता नदी उधर से,
मैंने जहाँ जहाँ नहीं दी जाएगी इनको अपना डैम लेके जाना पड़ेगा।
Nowadays it is very difficult to construct a hydro dam, hydropower projects. You very well know that because of eco-sensitive zone, because of NGOs and all that. So anyhow we have to protect them. Because of the barge. No. It is totally foreign funded. All these agitation and all that. Hydro is nothing to do with that. With barge.
Of this technology is very bleak, and if you realize the total costs that we are paying as a society for any one of these projects, then there should be no question of such projects going ahead.
Damn it!
You still think so?
Of course. How else do we make power?
Pancheshwar Dam, which is coming up with Nepal. It's about 311 meters high, it's going to be. It has been cleared, and it is in a high seismic zone where earthquakes have happened in the past few years, about 5 or 6 times, all over 5 on the Richter scale. So we did not cover corruption in the film at all. We just focused on the technology and the economics aspect of it, and of course the impacts and reactions of other people and their perspectives. So corruption is a different story. Corruption is a series. It can't be limited to a film. It has to be a web series or something. It's too much, it's too ingrained, and if we expect them to do a very good job of an EIA, I think we are living in a fool's paradise. I don't think it's possible.
Can you talk about solar and wind?
That you got to watch the film. You got to watch the film for it.
I will watch it.
Yeah.
But can you give us
So when we started making this film, we started with just the river, right? And then there was this very famous author called Tony Seba. I'm not sure if you have heard of him yet, but he wrote this book called Clean Disruption of Energy and Transportation. And we connected with him, and he said, like, why are you just limiting yourself to hydro? There's coal, there's this. And then he opened the can of worms, and we kind of got sucked into it. And we kind of expanded the entire film to include the rise of solar and wind as well. The difference between filming coal and hydro and solar and wind was very, very, very stark. While hydro and coal, it was very difficult to film in the sense that there was a lot to hide, and people were suspicious about our making the film or just having the camera. The solar and wind guys and all the companies, they would really welcome us and say, this is what we are doing, and this is where we're going to take this company, or these are our projects, this is a product, and all of that. So it was very, very different filming the solar and wind component of the film. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.